Come fly with me, far beyond the density, gazing down upon the matrix where you are free to see the cage, a place to which you refuse to be bound, because your mind, your soul, was always meant to soar with the eagles. Welcome to Beyond the Matrix.
Greetings, everybody. It's me, Patricia Cori, coming to you from well, it's almost night here because my guest is in Hawaii. So you'll probably be seeing darkness behind me instead of the usual glare. But I'm coming to you from previously sunny Azores, and it's night is approaching. And from island to island, I am so delighted to have Dr. Michael Salla back with me. I had him once before, but we didn't get as deep as I was hoping for. He was with Dan Willis, and this time I've got him all to myself. So we're going to be talking about some pretty hairy stuff because Dr. Michael Salla doesn't get around. So let me give you a quick bio about him. I'm going to call him Michael. I asked his permission. Dr. Michael Salla is a pioneer in the development of exopolitics, the political study of the key actors, institutions, and processes associated with extraterrestrial life. His interest in exopolitics evolved out of his investigation of the sources of international conflict and its relationship to an extraterrestrial presence that is not acknowledged to the general public, at least not yet, elected officials, or even senior military officials. I'm going to be asking him about that. Dr. Salla is an internationally recognized scholar in international politics, conflict resolution, and U.S. foreign policy, and a prolific author. I'm not even going to list all of his books, but you will have a link at the end of the video. He has a Ph.D. in government from the University of Wow, I didn't know that. From the University of Queensland, Australia, and a master's in philosophy from the, what a vast character you are. Government on one side and master's in philosophy from the University of Melbourne, Australia. He has conducted research and fieldwork in the ethnic conflicts in East Timor, Kosovo, Macedonia, and Sri Lanka, and has organized peacemaking initiatives involving mid to high participants from these conflicts. Dr. Salla founded the Exopolitics Institute in 2005 and the Exopolitics Journal in 2006. He has co-organized 5 international conferences on extraterrestrial life and Earth transformation on the Big Island of Hawaii. Dr. Salla is the host of exonews.tv and has appeared in hundreds of radio and television shows and international conferences for his research on exopolitics and international conflict. A list of his exopolitics interviews and conference papers appear on exopolitics.org. A copy of his curriculum vitae listing his academic publications, appointments, and interviews also available in that rich source that is his site, exopolitics.org. Today we're going to be diving into the question of his latest book, Space Force, Our Star Trek Future, and all the things that are happening with the, let's say, private sector, if we can call Bezos, Musk, and Branson private, and their launch into space, they're ripping into space, and what it all means. So, Michael, thank you so much for agreeing to come on, and thank you for waiting for me to get over my sprained ankle and various and other sundry things. Welcome.
Thanks, Patricia, for that introduction, and I'm looking forward to this interview.
Yeah, me too. I'm so excited. I've been waiting a long time to be back together with you. So in the meantime, you've launched your new book. That's wonderful. Before we dive into your book, I read that you've got information out about a galactic federation. I don't know if it's a galactic federation of worlds. Is that who you're talking about, meeting close to Jupiter? What's going on with that storyline?
Well, it's a fascinating story. I've been communicating with a contactee, a French contactee, Elena Danan, who is based in Ireland at the moment. And I got interested in her work because she was speaking with a super soldier whose testimony kind of checked out as being very, very real. And he died. I think he was murdered like less than a week after she interviewed him. And he had been warned not to talk to her. So that really got my attention. It was like, wow, this is someone that the deep state is very aware of and wants their people to kind of keep away from.
Wow.
Because this is, the deep state knows who are the genuine contactees, who are those that maybe controlled opposition, and there's a spectrum of people out there who claim to be in touch with the Galactic Federation or with different groups of extraterrestrials. So you need to be very discerning. So anyway, I think she's one of the genuine contactees out there. After my research has been done on her and due diligence and all of that. And so she contacted me on Saturday and told me that she had been just informed that the Galactic Federation had hosted a meeting just above Jupiter in a space station there, or some kind of galactic meeting place. I'm not exactly sure of the location, but it's not on Jupiter. It's not on one of the moons of Jupiter, but it's in orbit around Jupiter. So some facility there around Jupiter, and there were 14 nations represented. All these nations had space commands. These are countries that have set up militaries that are in charge of their space operations, that run their space programs. So you've got the usual suspects, the US, France, Britain, Germany, Italy, Australia, Japan, and you also had China and Russia participating. So 14 of them met. And what they were told was that the solar system is yours, that that the presence of the antagonistic groups of extraterrestrials, the reptilians, the Draco reptilians, and the Orion Alliance, has been negotiated, and that they're leaving the solar system. So the solar system is now ours. And so we can deal with it as we wish, but we need to do it responsibly. And the Galactic Federation is going to kind of work with these different space commands, which would be under the overall authority of the United States. And that is incredible information, but what really got me very, very interested in it was that it actually matches up with developments as I've described in the book that have recently occurred. In 2020, you actually had the Artemis Accords being negotiated. These were bilateral agreements between the United States, NASA in particular, with the space programs of other countries that were interested in collaborating on joint missions to space for space tourism, space exploration, mining, economic activities in general, and that they would also collaborate in the case of any kind of hostile threats. They would create these safety zones. And so this would all be done under US leadership. Now, in response, Russia said, no, we're not going to be a part of the Artemis Accords. These are US-centric. We don't want to be a part of it. And China wasn't invited, because the US position on China is that they're thieves. They steal all of our secrets. They don't respect intellectual property rights. So we're not going to have them involved in this as well. So China and Russia went their own way. They set up something called a lunar research station. That's their joint initiative now, to set up a joint lunar research station on the moon, and they invited other countries to join. So that was, I think that was early this year that they did that. So ever since that time, the Artemis Accords has grown. Other countries have signed on. The additional sign-ons included countries like Brazil, South Korea. India is also considering signing on, and NATO nations like Germany and so forth are also in the process. So what Elena said was that in these meetings, she said there were 12 meetings in all that took place on Jupiter, and that the last 3 meetings involved these 14 core nations, or these 14 nations with space programs, where the Galactic Federation said, okay, the US is going to be given authority to be in charge of the whole thing, because they are the one nation that most other nations are willing to cooperate with, which matches up with the Artemis Accords. And what was very interesting was that Elena said that Russia and China left the meetings very unhappy because the US was given authority to basically be in charge of the human colonization of space. So that's what the meetings were all about. And now humanity is being allowed, under the control of the Artemis, or through the framework created by the US and through the Artemis Accords, to colonize space. And China and Russia are kind of like on the outer of that. And I suspect that eventually Russia will join, and China will be forced to join as well under firm conditions.
So in the absurd condition in which the planet Earth currently exists, in almost anarchy globally, or it is really not anarchy, it's controlled totalitarianism. I'm playing the devil's advocate here. You're saying, and Ellen is saying, that the Galactic Federation of Worlds is giving authority to the United States for the colonization of the entire solar system?
Yeah, basically. And I think, and I wrote an article.
Much to chew on, isn't it?
Well, I wrote an article about that, and I drew a parallel with the Yalta agreements that happened in February of 1945. Now, what was significant about the Yalta agreements was that in February of 1945, the World War II was still raging in Europe. I mean, Nazi Germany hadn't capitulated. There was fighting on the Eastern Front, the Western Front. The Nazis were in full battle mode, launching everything they had to keep the war alive. But the great powers knew that the Germans had lost, that the war was over strategically, but the Germans were just fighting a strategic, a last gasp effort to kind of hold on to power as long as possible. But the Allies knew that the war was over. So they met at Yalta to divvy up Europe on the basis of the principle of national self-determination. So that happened while there was still another 3 months to go to defeat Nazi Germany in the war, and still another, another 6 months to go before the defeat of Imperial Japan. So, what we have with the Yalta agreements is the precedent where when there is a major war being fought between 2 blocks of nations, and you've won, and the other side knows they've won, but they're still fighting because they're holding out for some reason. The Germans were getting everything they could down to Antarctica so that they could continue their fight from down there. Then you still plan for the post-war order. So the same thing has happened, and this is what happened in Jupiter, that now the deep state is done. That whether it's 3 months, whether it's 6 months, everything they've done concerning elections, concerning, you know, the thing in the arm, Maxi, whatever you want to call it. The deep state agenda is collapsing, and people in the deep state and the white hats, the military intelligence community, know that. So they're planning for what happens. And the thing is, we need to consider what happens when the deep state collapses. Well, you know, Trump will emerge triumphant. Not only, you know, people think, well, Trump's going to be reinstated as American president, and it's like, oh, no, it's going to be more than that. He's going to become the world's first united president, or one of the central leaders on a world governing council, whatever it is. But there's going to be something set up, because we are going to, with the defeat of the deep state, with the exposure of everything they've been doing, Trump is going to become a central world figure, and either him or a council or something will form the very first world council. So he'll become a world president or something like that when all this is revealed, and they will release a lot of technologies, a lot of suppressed technologies, but they're going to do it in a way where the military and the major corporations keep proprietary hold of the most advanced stuff, but allow the less advanced stuff like reusable rocket technologies and maybe atomic power propulsion, things like that, to be disseminated for the civilian space sector. So that's what we're seeing now with Musk's SpaceX and with Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin, that's what's going on. But definitely we are going to be witnessing in the next 3 to 6 months. I don't know if it'll take much longer than 6 months, but you know, there will be the collapse of the deep state agenda and the white hats and all of those that are being suppressed at the moment. They are going to come out vindicated, and that's going to lead to a new world order
of a different variety.
It'll be very different to what the deep state planned. The deep state planned to have a tyrannical world government, whereas what we're going to have is something much more along the lines of kind of like a Starfleet, like in Star Trek. You had Starfleet as being this kind of like benevolent military power that controlled all the major nations on Earth. That's what's going to emerge over the next few years. It's going to be a Starfleet, and we are watching it unfold before our very eyes, with the creation of the Artemis Accords, with the creation of a space center by NATO. So NATO now has created a space center, and all of the major powers are now creating space commands. In 2021, this year, Germany created a space command. Britain created a space command. One other major power created a space command. Italy created a space command, and Australia is setting up a space command as well. It takes off officially in 2022. So the framework for a comprehensive multinational space coalition is being created before our very eyes, like Star Trek or Starfleet is being created before our very eyes, and it's all being set up. And in the next few years, we are going to be having a international coalition which is collaborating for space exploration, and it will be a new world order. It'll be different to what the deep state had planned, because this one will be based on American leadership, where the US Constitution and US values, freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of religion, all of these things become the dominant values, as opposed to what the New World Order guys wanted to do with suppressing everything under a kind of tyrannical one world rule where social media and big tech were all being used to monitor our thoughts and to control us, and transhumanism would take off. So that was the deep state agenda, and that's collapsing.
Well, it sure doesn't look like it is, and I'm with you all the way that we pray and hope that it is, and that the direction we've been given since Trump is the right way. But it's very hard to see how Trump comes back into power. Like you said, he doesn't have to be the president. It's going to be possibly bigger. It's very hard to see it. I've been a Trump supporter from the get-go. So I'm just, again, doing the devil's advocate. When we see him touting the vase, telling people to go get the vase, it just drives me crazy. I'm like, wait a minute, aren't you the man who told people we have alternatives to the vase? We have healing possibilities, new ideas, let's look to that. What happened to that, Trump?
Very good question. I don't know to that one. I don't have an answer to that. I do know that what will get Trump back is that all of these audits that are being organized, that as they start coming out, what's going to happen is that there are tens of millions of Trump voters out there in the United States who voted for Trump, support Trump, but they're bought into the gaslighting, the mainstream media gaslighting, that Biden won the election fair and square.
Sure.
And they've been convinced that there was an insurrection at the White House, at Congress on January 6th, and so they've been gaslighted. And when the Maricopa County results come out, and then other results start flowing as other counties follow suit, what you're going to have is those tens of millions of Trump supporters who have been gaslighted are suddenly going to wake up and realize that, well, Trump was right. The election was stolen.
Let's hope that they wake up, because he told them to go get their jab.
Well,
Michael, here's the thing. The storyline that we all want and hope for and love, that you are saying here, is the hopeful outcome. But every time I speak to anybody knowledgeable like you, and I ask this question, we get stuck, and it's like, yeah, it's hard to understand that, but we have to be accountable for that. There has to be an explanation why Trump continues to this day to tell people to go get that jab, and finding it very difficult to cope with. And that everybody I talk to, everybody I interview says, yeah, it's kind of, well, somebody said it was because he was being forced by the mafia. Other people have said that it's all a ruse and he's doing it to push things along. None of the explanations work. The bottom line is, anybody that's telling me to go get my vase is not somebody I trust. So I'm in a dilemma here, because I've been, pro-Trump from the get-go until this vase started, with him telling people, go get your shot, he said in one occasion. And in another, there's nothing wrong with the shot, it's safe, go get, trust it. I'm having a real problem with that. And if we can't find an answer for that, then there's a chink in the armor, isn't there?
I don't have an answer for it. I can speculate, but it's, as you said, people are trying to explain what appears to be a contradiction, that Trump is this white knight that the white hats and the Q crowd have been supporting, and all of a sudden he's part of this narrative and helping launch this kind of narrative. Now, yes, some people have said that this was Trump taking initiative away from the deep state. The deep state wanted to roll out the vaccines, but later, that their playbook involved it being rolled out later, and that by doing what he did, that Trump got the vaccine rolled out much quicker, so that people are being forced to take the vaccine now, when the number of deaths are kind of like fairly insignificant given the overall numbers. But if it were like a year down the track, that more people were dying, then the vax could have been rolled out more quickly. I mean, that's an explanation I've heard.
Doesn't
That
work for me.
yeah,
Lots of
well,
people are dying from this so-called placebo. I mean, let's get real. I don't know. There's no answer to this, and we probably don't want to get stuck on it because I think we both are coming from the same place, and that is, this is wanting to believe absolutely that Trump is who we believe he is, and that he's I'm having trouble believing he's in charge right now, because if he is, it's very hard to understand what the strategy is. But let's just hope that you're right and that we're going to see the White Hats clean this up, because it's getting pretty dicey on planet Earth at this time. What about the sovereignty of the other planets? How is it that the warring planet Earth goes to a meeting of the of the Galactic Federation and is given carte blanche to go invade other planets? What about the other planets? What about their sovereignty?
well, in our solar system, this is like, as we know, that there's no kind of like intelligent life on the surface of other planets. Now, underground or in the oceans, there's life there, but Earth is the only planet in our solar system that has a very large, technologically sophisticated society on the surface with billions of people. I think other planets or the moons have kind of pockets or underground civilizations. Now, I don't think the galactics have given Earth and the United States carte blanche to rule over the solar system. What they've done is they've said, look, up until now, your evolution has been stunted because you've had these draconians and these Orions, troublemakers, creating conflict and strife and really preventing you from evolving in the natural way. So we're removing them from the picture. So now it's up to you to spread and do what it is that you feel is best for yourselves and for the solar system, and we'll be here to help you evolve.
Why weren't they there to help us evolve sooner?
Well, they have. They've been here all along, but the US said no and made agreements with the Draconians and with the Orions in the 1950s. I mean, President Eisenhower, he met with the Galactic Federation at Edwards Air Force Base on February 20, 1954. And the Federation told him, look, this is how we can help you. We'll help you develop spiritually, ethically. We'll give you some technologies to help improve the quality of life, but nothing that's going to be used for your weapons programs. And Eisenhower's advisors said, no, they want us to do away with our thermonuclear weapons, and we're not going to do that. And so the Galactic Federation said, well, those are the terms. If you don't accept that, then we are leaving. But they warned before they left, they said, after us, you're going to have other groups approaching you. We warn you, don't trust them. They are not to be trusted. And so sure enough, the Orion delegation showed up. The Draconians were already working with the breakaway Nazi group in Antarctica. And so that they had a way of getting into the Eisenhower administration through the Project Paperclip scientists. So agreements were made, separate agreements were made with the Germans in Antarctica and their Draconian allies, and also agreements were made with the Orions, which were like the tall greys. And so agreements were made in the 50s, and those agreements have been in place ever since. And now the Galactic Federation has been attacking the Draconian and the Orion bases on the Earth, on Mars and Moon, and removing their presence. And so now humanity is being given the opportunity now to like take control and deal with the aftermaths of all of those agreements, and with the German Dark Fleet, which still has a powerful presence in our solar system.
What's going on in Antarctica now? We're hearing a lot of stories about Antarctica shutting down, melting down. What is your understanding of what's going on with the German presence there, and obviously the ET connection?
Well, what's been happening in Antarctica is that the ice sheets in West Antarctica are melting because there's a vast network of underground volcanoes. There's about 130 volcanoes in West Antarctica, making Antarctica the world's most active volcanic region. A lot of people don't know that because they just think there's a few volcanoes in Antarctica and they erupt occasionally. But actually, most of Antarctica's volcanoes are under the ice sheet.
Mm-hmm.
So they're all melting the ice sheet from underneath. And this is why West Antarctica is melting rapidly. Now, the big change in Antarctica recently is that the Draconian and the Orion bases in Antarctica have been cleaned out. That the Galactic Federation has stepped in to remove those bases, and that the Dark Fleet, which was the German outgrowth of that alliance, that is starting to evacuate Antarctica, leave Antarctica, and hand things over to their former allies and to Turkey and China.
Oh man!
And one of the things that I found very interesting, that we actually do have a source. This was someone Elena Danan put me in touch with. We have a source in Antarctica. His name is Frank. He works down there. He works at McMurdo. And he said now, in the midst of winter, typically Antarctica closes down in the midst of winter. Very few people are coming in. But he said that there are a lot of people leaving Antarctica. And he said that a lot of these people that were leaving were German speaking. And they leave through the ship port that is there at McMurdo. It's the only year-round shipping port in Antarctica. So a lot of these Germans were coming from the interior of Antarctica and leaving. And what was coming in was a flood of Chinese and Turkish scientists and Turkish military. And what was happening was that the Dark Fleet was moving a lot of their assets out and handing over their bases to the Chinese and to the Turks. That's the thrust of what was happening in Antarctica. So there's a change there.
Do you have any intel on what that means? I mean, what I've never heard of the Chinese being allied with the Turks. Do you have any feeling of what's going down?
Well, we know that China has been building. Currently, they have 5 bases in Antarctica, and they were building more. So China is moving a lot of resources and building bases in Antarctica. And the Chinese are partnering, I think, with the Dark Fleet. I mean, that's what's going on here. And the Turks, they have long been sympathetically aligned with the Germans, because the Turks have the same mindset, which is the master race mindset. The Turks feel that they are genetically the master race in Eurasia. Yeah, I mean, I've been there, and I know I've seen a little bit of the Turkish mindset, and the Germans, that was part of Nazism, the master race mindset. So they have always been ideologically very compatible, and the Chinese have the same mindset, which is they are the Middle Kingdom, that they are the people that have been divinely ordained to take control of the planet. So to me, it's not a great surprise that China, the German Dark Fleet, the Turks are all aligning themselves, and that a lot of resources in Antarctica are being handed over to the Chinese and to the Turks.
Yeah, that's a little ominous, isn't it?
Well, this is the reality that we are going to be facing, is that over the next I guess, 50 years, you are going to have two major space coalitions competing for domination over our solar system. One is going to be the Artemis Accords, led by the United States, and the other is going to be led by China, with other major powers that, for whatever reason, are disgruntled with US leadership. And for the moment, Russia is disgruntled. And they'll work with China. The Turks are working with China, and the Belt Road Initiative. They're trying to bring other countries into their fold, and so they will. But currently, because there's only about, I think, roughly 14 or 16, something like that, just over a dozen countries in the world with space programs that have space commands, that have rocket launchers and are able to get astronauts and militaries into space. There's only just over a dozen. And of those, only Russia and China are opposed to US leadership and it being at the core of this growing multinational space alliance. But I think this is the way it's going to be for the next 40, 50 years. China is going to become more powerful. It's going to have the world's biggest economy. That already is close to having the world's biggest economy. In another 5 years, by the end of this decade, by 2030, China will have the world's biggest economy. It'll have the world's biggest military, and the US, in contrast, will have set up a multinational alliance who collectively have a bigger military and a bigger economy. And that's the only way that China's power can be contained, because all the Western democracies know, when you look at it, when you get beyond all of the verbiage, when you look at it, China is a totalitarian state. It lies, it cheats, it will do anything it can to establish hegemony, and it's a communist one-party state. So it doesn't believe in people's rights, it seeks to dominate people. And so all of the leaders of the other nations know this. And so none of them will support China. They'll work with the US. But that's going to be the new major Cold War, if you like, over the next 50 years. It'll be the US alliance, US space alliance against the Chinese.
So let's go into your book, Space Force, Our Star Trek Future. We've been talking around it a bit. I've got some questions for you. So starting with, why did President Trump embrace the idea of, it was such a big thing for him to embrace the idea of Space Force in March 2000, was it 2018?
2018.
Yeah, and the insignia being almost identical to Star Trek, which I thought was a nice touch. But what is your understanding of what his intent was, and did he accomplish it?
Yes, his intent was very much to create a space force and to also set up Space Command, which is essentially Space Force is like you're setting up a space service where you train a space corps, or the Guardians as they now call it. You train them, you equip them, but then it's Space Command that actually orders their deployment, that is in control of their deployment and coordinates it with the space forces of the Navy, of the Army, the Marine Corps, and so forth. So Trump sets up Space Force, or proposes the creation of Space Force in 2018, and then soon after, it's proposed that one of the key ways for Space Force being set up is to reconstitute US Space Command. So US Space Command was first created in 1985, and it ran up until 2002, and then it was disbanded in 2002. And that was because of the 9/11 attacks and because of the Gary McKinnon leaks, where he talked about a secret space program. That was actually, he exposed what was being run by Space Command. So they disbanded Space Command and made it a subordinate to Strategic Command, which is in control of the US nuclear weapons. So Trump proposes Space Force in 2018, and the reason he did that was because his advisors, white hats, the people that want to bring about a more positive future for the United States and for our planet, that they wanted to create a very powerful space coalition with the US at the heart of it. Whereas the deep state, they wanted to do the opposite. They wanted to create a space program that would be under the control of the United Nations, and where the United States would be essentially dismissed as a space power or as an effective military power. So that was the deep state agenda. So in proposing Space Force and getting Congress to agree to set it up, and in the process reinstating Space Command, I mean, a number of things were achieved. Trump created a way for the US to stop what was in the pipeline, which was to destroy the US military as an effective fighting force and to have it all eventually transferred over to a United Nations force where China would have a really big role, a really big say in that. You also created this space coalition where Space Force and Space Command would be at the core of a multinational space coalition. And finally, you would create a Star Trek future. And that this Star Trek future would be one where Space Force would be like the core of what in future will be called Starfleet. So right now, Space Force, as we see it, is the seed for what will be in maybe 10 years' time a worldwide Starfleet, where people from all over the world who are whose countries are part of the Artemis Accords, they will be able to sign on and join this multinational space coalition that will be headed by will have Space Force at its core, and that they will all be united. And we're seeing this now with the creation of space commands. All of these major nations are creating space commands, and so they are going to integrate, and that will be Starfleet. And this, in the book, I say that this is not an accident. That in fact, Gene Roddenberry, back in the 1960s, he was briefed on what was going to be happening in the 2030s. That he was told this. People think, okay, Gene Roddenberry comes up with Starfleet, Star Trek in the 1960s. What a creative visionary. No, he wasn't a creative visionary at all. He was part of a soft disclosure program where the US Navy's secret space program were using him to seed humanity with the idea of a Starfleet that would be convened sometime in the early 2030s, if not earlier. And that he was fed all these ideas by the creator of The Outer Limits, Leslie Stevens, who allowed Gene Roddenberry to sit on the second season of The Outer Limits and absorb all of the ideas to kind of see what was necessary for creating a sci-fi series, to take some of the producers, to take some of the lead actors into this new sci-fi show. And at the end of the second season of The Outer Limits, that folded, and virtually the most talented staff and actors went over to Gene Roddenberry and began working with him on Star Trek. And this was all done with the collusion of Leslie Stevens. And who is Leslie Stevens? I mean, people know him as the creator of The Outer Limits. He was the son of a vice admiral who was running Navy intelligence, who was running joint operations, intelligence gathering operations between the Navy and the other military services and the CIA back back in the 1950s. And Leslie Stevens was himself, during the Second World War, working with Army intelligence. So Leslie Stevens passed on this information to Gene Roddenberry, and Gene Roddenberry ran with it and created Star Trek. So Star Trek is not fiction. It's actually a depiction of our planet in the 2030s. So that's what Star Trek is.
That explains why all of the technology that was exhibited in Star Trek was sort of a blueprint for what we have now, starting with the cell phone, right?
Exactly.
I mean, in a small way, that was just, there was some of the little tasty bits that we were shown. It's fascinating. So where do you feel this fits in with these multi-billionaires coming into the space program? What is their function? What is their role in all this?
Well, what's happening, I think, is that we are witnessing a two-tiered system being created. The first tier is going to be the most advanced technologies that have been secretly developed from reverse engineering captured extraterrestrial craft, and that's going to remain the proprietary property of these major aerospace corporations like Lockheed Martin, like Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, Boeing, and so forth. And then you're going to have a lot of these startup companies, which are going to run the second tier, and they are going to be using reusable rockets. So you're going to have SpaceX, Blue Origin, and a bunch of others that are all going to come up with these reusable rockets, and they are going to be intended for the civilian space industry. And that's going to enable many companies to send human colonists up to the moon, to Mars, and using these rocket-propelled technologies. But the more advanced technologies are going to be kept as proprietary technology for these major aerospace companies and for the military and the intelligence communities that are going to use them for the future Starfleet. So we're going to have like a two-tiered system, like almost like space will be separated between what the military and the major corporations are able to do in space and people going through space on rockets. And kind of like on the rockets, like now you're on an airplane and something shoots by and say, look at that, did you see that, a UFO? It'll be the same thing in space. You're on your rocket, you're on your 18-month tour of Mars. So you're on some big tourist ship that's being propelled using kerosene or methane, however it is they plan to propel these things. So you're on that thing and you see something shoot by and you say, well, look at a UFO. Well, that's going to be belonging to the space commands. That's going to be belonging to this future Starfleet. And, at some point they will begin to share more of that advanced technology, but they'll do it in a way because, the thing is, the big difference between these exotic technologies and gas or rocket-propelled technology is that when you're talking about anti-gravity, antimatter, torsion fields, those sorts of exotic systems, you're talking about technologies that have a space-time application, that when you apply these, they can manipulate space-time. When you're talking about rocket-propelled technologies, that doesn't impact space-time, has zero impact. It's just using Newtonian physics, that's it, straight, no problem there. Now with these exotic technologies, the problem, these cannot be made available to the commercial sector because if these are weaponized, they can create weapons far more powerful than the hydrogen bomb. That the Tsar bomber that was 60 megatons that was detonated in Siberia by the Soviet Union in the late 50s, that'll look like a firecracker compared to some of these torsion fields or antimatter weapons that can be developed. And so they're going to keep really tight control on those exotic technologies for at least a decade or more. And in the process, we're going to have a two-tiered system, a segregated system in space.
Much earlier on, like decades ago, in some of my channeled material, the council were talking about how our understanding of movement in space is so antiquated because it's very simple. You just alter the time space, the space in front of the craft or behind you, you can alter by, and we think about, I'm no scientist, but if you think about atoms, when they're heated up, they expand. When they're frozen, they contract. So it's that simple, basically, very simplistic terms to move a craft shooting through space. That's how, one of the ways that you get those 90-degree turns. It's just a matter of altering the space-time. And that's what you're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think also as you develop those kinds of technologies, I mean, you can actually go back in time. And so then it becomes an issue of, well, if people are going back in time, can they change events? Is that going to affect the timeline? And so it opens up a really challenging can of worms. So I think this is why they want to control those technologies and make sure that you don't have people, private citizens, with easy access to these kinds of space-time technologies. Because they could do things and start messing up the timeline, and of course weapons. I mean, if you have terrorists with a lot of resources, they could weaponize these things and create all sorts of problems. So this is, I think, how they're going to justify not releasing these advanced technologies for a certain period of time until they work out how to do it without it being dangerous. But for the start, you'll have rocket technologies being used to set up space mining, space colonies, space tourism, and eventually some of the major companies might start building cruises, or you can do a space cruise to the moons of Jupiter with, say, Lockheed Martin's flagship space cruiser or something, which is equipped with these kinds of technologies. That may happen later down the track, but for the moment, I think you'll just have the two-tiered system, a civilian space industry with rockets, and you'll have the military using these space-time propulsion systems.
Do you think you'll make it onto one of those ships?
I doubt I'll ever get on one of those rockets, but I'll probably end up on one of the space-time devices. I'll probably get to use on those, work with those. Probably working with the Galactics, with the Galactic Federation. I mean, I'm pretty sure, you and I and many listening to this starseeds, that we are with one or more groups out there, and so I think as there's more of an awakening, as it becomes safer to be able to openly interact with extraterrestrials. I mean, that's going to be the big wild card in all of this, is how much of the extraterrestrial presence is going to be disclosed. I mean, that at the moment, that's the big guess. I imagine at the beginning they're going to try to restrict that, maybe pull off a false flag event, try and make it seem that the extraterrestrials are either evil invaders or they're these benevolent saviors, kind of go for one extreme or the other. Because the truth is, as I'm sure you know, is that the extraterrestrials are like us. They're a mixed bag. You got the good, the bad, and the ugly. You just got to make choices. You just got to look at, okay, who are the ones that are in alignment with our values and behave in a ethical and responsible way, and those that are manipulative and aggressive, and we can spot those off a mile away. You can feel them. So we have to develop that. But for the moment, these are, for the next 3 to 6 months, these are very dangerous times, because the deep state is a cornered animal. It knows its agenda is collapsing. Absolutely. And it can play. I think it's going to play one of its false flag. I think it's going to play the false flag card. Now, whether it's going to trot out the negative extraterrestrial alien invasion scenario, or whether it pulls out, which I think is more likely in my mind, the alien salvation. The aliens are here. They're here to save us from.
Much more dangerous thing, isn't it? I mean, you brought that up in the last time we spoke, and I really had never really given that a lot of thought. But once you elaborated, I thought, oh boy, talk about the ultimate screw. Is, you know, Captain Kirk arriving with a mandate on how to help humanity, and the human race falling for it, right?
Exactly.
More dangerous and much more in line with how the dark force works. They like the twist.
Exactly.
In the storyline.
Yeah, that's what the deep state does. That you know, they condition people to think one way, so everyone is thinking, oh, it's going to be an alien invasion. You know, we're ready for it. We know what they're up to. But then instead they roll out an alien salvation. And next thing you know, you have a human-looking extraterrestrial.
That's right.
Posing with the Pope, posing with the United Nations Secretary General, posing with the leader of China, saying, you know, we want to promote a one world government. Right. We want to promote world unity. And these leaders are the most trustworthy on the planet.
And that the way that we're going to bring you into the galactic community is to help direct you. It's really very frightening, that option. And in the state of mind control that a lot of people are in at the moment, I am concerned about it, because you've got the people that are still hanging on, the Q people, the Trump people, the Patriot people, and just the open-minded people, thinking, when are we going to get some help from the ETs? And, you know, this is not the kind of help we're looking for, but they would be extremely vulnerable to this kind of manipulation, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, this is the thing that a lot of people aren't prepared for, that the situation will be more like a V, like the movie series, the TV series V, that the first extraterrestrials that show up are working. They've been secretly working with the deep state for 70 years now. But now they show up and they say, well, we are here to help you with your global problems. You've got problems with, you know, these killer viruses. You've got problems with the environment. You've got problems with the kind of like pollution all over your planet. And so they'll come up with all of these solutions. And because the mainstream media and big tech are all gaslighting the world. I mean, look what they've got. Look what they're getting people to do. Ridiculous things like making 3-year-olds mask up. It's just like ridiculous. They're getting people to do ridiculous things. Yeah. And so it's like, yeah, I think the deep state can try to pull that off. And why I think that this is a very likely possibility, and it's something I'm going to be talking about in my next webinar. So I on August 1st, I'm going to be doing a webinar on this exact topic. I think the deep state will be doing this because it's the one scenario that creates maximum confusion. Because as you said, a lot of the people in the kind of resistance or the awake and aware community, you know, they're waiting for the positive ETs to show up.
Right.
And so they're going to be blindsided if all of a sudden you have these beautiful human-looking ETs showing up
with some holograms and some fancy footwork.
Well, you know, some of these human-looking ETs do work with the deep state. They do work with the draconians. They control.
Get up with lots of holograms and all kinds of light beams and whatever. But yeah, I think that you've proposed this in the last talk, and I really thought about it a lot after we spoke, and I thought, yep, that's got the imprint of the dark side much more than the alien attack done that. We got the T-shirt from every TV movie ever made, every movie made. No, this is much more insipid, and this is exactly how you kill the awake and aware communities, dreams and hope and vision, because you plant an artificial savior, and he comes and says, you know, like, we're going to be tough, but it's going to be tough love, but we're going to get you into the Galactic Federation of Nations and worlds, but we're going to show you the way to do it, and some of it you're not going to love and some of it you will, right? Talk about totalitarianism. Imagine a planet of confusion and hysteria suddenly being told, look, we're bringing you into the Galactic Federation. This is what we're going to do.
Right, and one of the other reasons that I think that the deep state is going to pull this off is because they absolutely hate the Galactic Federation. They despise the Galactic Federation because the Galactic Federation has destroyed their power bases. Their relationship with these Draconians, with the Orions, has been destroyed because of the Galactic Federation. So, if you know you're on your way out, that your power base is crumbling, and you know that the Galactic Federation is largely responsible for that, or a major player in that, well, what better way to do it than to just pretend to be the Galactic Federation coming in to rescue? You have your people posing as the Galactic Federation coming in, and what it does is it poisons the minds of people for decades, or for years, if not decades. So this I think will be like a poison pill,
Yeah,
if you like.
it's like the Trojan horse. Okay, they come
Yeah.
in and it looks good, and then they zap the human race. It's very scary, this one. I hope
Yeah,
but it feels like that's what I agree with you. I feel like that's what they're going to try to do.
And it's already happening now. I mean, and I can say this publicly because he said it. I mean, Dr. Stephen Greer, he's come out with a movie called The Cosmic Hoax, where he talks up the alien invasion scenario. He talks that up, but he's laid the groundwork for the alien salvation scenario, because what he does is, in that movie, he comes up with something called exo-racism. If you start talking about some negative, some extraterrestrials as being evil or aggressive or malevolent, you're a racist. And he actually starts calling people, and I'm included in that category. He calls us exo-racists, and this fits in perfectly with the new the radical left critical racial theory. It's like it's all based on racism, critiquing racism.
He calls you a racist?
He identifies exo-racists. In the past, in 2006, he came out with an article, and he called me a xenophobe. A xenophobe.
So I'm really kind of interested to hear this, because I thought at one point you were aligned with him, and I had a problem with that.
I agree with about 95% of what Greer says, but the 5% I disagree with is a very strong disagreement, because I believe that there are some negative extraterrestrial groups. He doesn't. And the thing is, he's come after me in the past, and I've documented this. He's explicitly identified me back in 2006 as a xenophobe, that I was promoting xenophobia. But now he's not calling it xenophobia, he's calling it exo-racism, because that fits into the new narrative. So what you have here, critical racial theory that's being pushed globally, and what you have is, you have the foundation set now for when the extraterrestrials show up with this kind of like savior mindset, or this false flag event to save us. Anyone talking about extraterrestrials in a negative way are going to be called exo-racists.
I find the whole situation, it's a fine line between hysterical and frighteningly dystopian. And this whole structure, you watch it being put into place, you watch how they, every step is so visibly, it's clear as day when you're awake, you see exactly how they're putting it into place. And, but to extend it to being an exo-racist, that is new for me. Oh my God, what next? Because I always thought that with a realization of extraterrestrial life being presented to the human race, there would be a unifying aspect of human beings saying, well, whatever that is, we're humans. But no, because we're going to be divided into exo-racists and politically correct, galactically correct humans. Where does it all end, Michael?
Right. Well, and it's very worrying, because you can imagine if social media and big tech all of a sudden, they buy into this and say, yes, this is correct. People shouldn't be allowed to put out hate speech, demeaning extraterrestrial civilizations and putting out all of this. All these exo races should be deplatformed. They should be demonetized. So all of a sudden, you get YouTube and you get Amazon deplatforming people talking about draconian reptilians or Orion Greys doing all of these nasty things and being in secret agreements with the deep state. All of a sudden, they're being deplatformed, demonetized, just as they've done to people that were supporting the kind of the pro-Trump or the Q narrative. Look at what happened to them. I think that's what the deep state can do if they roll out this alien false flag savior event. Anyone identifying the aliens as part of this negative group, we can be targeted.
I truly don't believe that that will fly, that it will gel. I think that there's still enough humanity left in the human race that people will say, okay, now you're really crossing the line. But then you've already seen it put into work with you. It's so racist. Did you laugh?
Well, at the time I was organizing a major conference, and the last thing I wanted was an important disclosure project, disclosure organizer calling me a xenophobe just before my major conference, and that really took the wind out of the sails of the conference. It helped sabotage the sale, the conference attendance and so forth, which I think was the agenda. This was the Extraterrestrial Civilizations and World Peace Conference that was being organized in Kona, Hawaii in 2006. And here you have Stephen Greer calling me, the organizer of that conference, a xenophobe, publicly calling me out just before that. So, Greer definitely saw something that I was doing that was a threat to what he has been doing for a long time. And I am very concerned about what he's doing right now, because I think he has set things up for this bait and switch. Everyone's expecting a false flag alien invasion. Greer's putting that out there. His movie Cosmic Hoax does exactly that, but it's going to be it's a bait and switch. Instead of that, it's going to be like the alien salvation, and then Greer, he'll be the first one. Welcome the aliens. Sure. They are here to help us. They are our friends. That's right. And anyone...
I always told you there were no bad aliens, and here we have, you've all been waiting for the attack, and instead look what we have here. Members of the Galactic Federation who care about the human race, yada, 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 yada.
Exactly.
It's diabolically clever. And I think people really need to be thinking about this. I'm really glad that we've taken this direction in our talk tonight, because like I said, in our first talk, you brought it up and it tweaked my mind. And again, now, in fact, I did an interview recently with Mike Oram, who you probably know. And we both were saying, when are we going to get some help here? I mean, we're not asking for saviors, but we could use a little help here. Some technology, some breakthrough information, solid stuff, not just channels. And, people are asking for that. And so that's what we're going to be given. I'm pretty confident that you're on the pulse here, and that people should be thinking, because I'm always calling out to people to use discernment and not to trust what you see. And it is very clear that the truther movement and the Q movement and whatever you want to call it, spirit, whatever, has been dramatically infiltrated. And I can't say it enough. And some of the people are, to me, so clearly obvious that it's almost comical. These people that appear out of nowhere and have this huge voice, seem to have a lot of money behind them. Watch out. How did you just appear and all of a sudden you're on every single talk show there is out of nowhere? Who are you? No book, no nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's suspect. So, Michael, there's a lot of conversation about who and what the Galactic Federation of Worlds really is. And there are people that say it's a scam and it's another setup and that it's dark. And then, of course, people like us believe that it is a wonderful unification of conscious universe, planetary civilizations that are working together for the good of the universe and humankind and life in general. What do you have to say to the question of people that are talking about the galactic, or I'm sure you've heard people talk about the fact that Galactic Federation is dark and manipulative?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of stories about the Federation and the Confederation. And I mean, when you look at the history of that, I mean, I think one of the earliest references to the Confederation was from George Van Tassel. And he talked about it in his books, The Council of Seven Lights, I think it was, where he talked about this Galactic Confederation as being very benevolent. And so, you know, some of the others, you know, some of the other classic contactees also talked about it. And then you have in the 1980s, you have the Ra material talking about the Confederation of Planets. Mm-hmm. And the Ra material, I think, is a really good set of channeled information. I mean, everyone continues to refer to it in glowing terms. And they talk about the Confederation of Planets as being this very positive group here to help. And then they talk about the Orion Alliance, or they actually called them the Orion Crusaders. And they said that these were into power, these were into control. And then you had others coming up talking about the reptilians. And so as best I understand it now, there are three main power blocks out there in our galaxy, all vying against each other for power and influence. The Galactic Federation of Worlds, which is largely a lot of human-looking civilizations, but not exclusively. And they are based on principles like freedom. They believe in self-determination, and so they are more in alignment with the way we would consider to be kind of Western democratic values. And then you have the other groups like the Draconian Empire, which is essentially a totalitarian state. At the apex, you have a totalitarian power, which is very racist, which identifies different races as being more suited or less suited to particular functions. So at the very apex, you'll have these draconians who are the kind of masters of the universe. And then they go through a kind of hierarchy, similar to how the Nazis did it. They had a whole racial hierarchy where the Aryans were at the top, and then you had the British and the French, and then you had the kind of like the Mediterranean races and so forth, all the way down to the slave races. The Draconians are exactly the same. And then you have this the Orion Alliance, which seems to be some kind of the way I would consider them is almost like religious fundamentalists, that they have some kind of queen or some kind of central religious authority there, running it out of the Orion Nebula, and they are very fundamentalist, and they are kind of like religious crusaders, if you like, and which is the way in which the Ra material referred to them, the Orion Crusaders. So it's like these guys are on a religious quest, and they have and it's very interesting. If you go to the book by J.J. Hurtak, The Keys of Enoch, he talks about this. He talks about the Orion Empire, or the Orion kind of power matrix. You know, like in the belt of Orion, you have this hierarchy of control, like religious, very highly evolved beings that are there, but this is something that is part of a religious galactic movement. So I think there's three different power groups out there, and they all compete against each other for influence over newly evolving solar systems like ours. Like, you know, our solar system has been evolved, very highly evolved in the past, but there were galactic wars here and everything collapsed. And now we're kind of like going through another upswing in terms of developing advanced technologies and so forth. So these power groups are here. They're trying to exercise influence and control and take us in a particular direction. So I do believe that there is something called the Galactic Federation of Worlds that is trying to help us, but they're fighting against other groups that have no scruples in imitating the Galactic Federation and trying to make out that the Galactic Federation is them. So that creates confusion. People don't know who to work with. Well, are you the Galactic Federation, or are you the Galactic Federation of Light? Are you the Ashtar Command, or are you the Ashtar Collective? People get confused because one works with the other and works with the other.
Deliberately, we're being deliberately confused by all the misinformation that's out there.
Totally. And that's
what do you
that's
think?
the game plan.
So if these dark forces do this Trojan horse event, don't you think that the real Federation will intervene? I mean, so let's say a false, I mean, you know, I'm saying these things and I'm recalling so many episodes of Star Trek with the Captain Kirk variety, because the others paled, even though it was, you know, really amateurish technology at the time. The storylines were very powerful. And, you know, we had Captain Kirk going back and forth in time all the time and all kinds of stuff. So, and then we had the one episode where he divides because of the transporter. So something goes wrong in the transporter, and the good Kirk gets separated from the evil Kirk that's within each of us. Beautiful philosophy. I mean, and something to think about. Imagine the scenario where we're presented with a false Captain Kirk, just to use him as an example. Can we, in your opinion, look forward to the real Galactic Federation saying, no, this is crossing the line here, and intervening? So we've got these two figures or groups coming forward saying, no, I'm the real one. No, I'm the real one. It's something to think about, isn't it?
Well, I think what will happen is that if the deep state pulls this card out, and I think it very highly likely that they will pull it out, that what, you know, they'll imitate the Galactic Federation coming here to save us. And then there's going to be this kind of like awakening as people realize that these are not real, that this is a false flag event, that these are not really extraterrestrials here to help us, that they are the ones that have been doing the negative agreements. Now, the Galactic Federation, you know, they'll be watching all of it, and I think they'll make a decision. Now, I think if the deep state just does it on its own, uses holograms, the Galactic Federation will just stay out of it. If the deep state uses members of, say, the Orion Alliance or the Draconian, you know, like human-looking extraterrestrials that are part of that alliance, then the Galactic Federation will intervene. So, you know, so I think it's very contingent on how this plays out. But if it's just done through holograms and the deep state creating a genuine false flag event, then I think the Federation will just kind of like stay in the background and let us sort it all out ourselves. But if it's done in a way where genuine extraterrestrials come forward and try to pretend to be members of the Galactic Federation, then yeah, I think they'll probably intervene in some way. But it'll be really messy because it'll be very confusing if you have, you know, one side calling itself, well, we're the Galactic Federation of Worlds, and the other side saying, well, the Galactic Federation of Light, we're the real ones, and it's like, no, we're the real ones. It'll be very confusing.
How do you think it's going to play out in your gut?
I think it's all contingent on what the deep state does. I mean, they're the ones, you know, they're the ones that have the control at the moment. They control the media.
But you said Trump is in control.
Not of the media. Trump doesn't control the media.
No, not at all.
No.
But
I mean,
at the beginning of our talk, I thought you said the White Hats and Trump are in control.
I think there's Trump and the White Hats control the military, US military, through a continuity of government process that has been set up, that's been run out of Cheyenne Mountain, which incidentally has been newly named as a Space Force base. So Cheyenne Mountain, rather than being an Air Force base, it's now a Space Force base. So, but anyway, in Cheyenne Mountain, when the lockdowns came in, they shut it all down. And that, I think, is where they're running this continuity of government. So just managing this whole show with Biden, that to me, Biden is like a show just to kind of like wake people up. So in that sense, they're in control of this kind of like military political theater that we're seeing with Biden. They're kind of circumscribing what Biden can do and not do. And so, yeah, there is a certain amount of control that Trump and the White Hats have. But when it comes to the media and the big tech, that's totally controlled by the deep state. And this is where we have to ask ourselves, well, can the deep state, through its control of the media and the big tech, pull off some kind of false flag invasion? And I think, yeah, they still have a lot of power. They can, and if only they do it out of spite, to confuse things, to poison people's minds about the Galactic Federation. I think the deep state would get a lot of satisfaction out of doing it that way, just to poison people, having someone arrive saying, oh, we're the Galactic Federation, we're here to help you, and we are, and Pope Francis is a really good guy, and China's President Xi is a great guy, and the United Nations needs to be supported, and you need to really curb your exo-racists out there that are saying all these nasty things because these greys and reptilians are our brothers in Christ and all of that. Then we know it's a whole bunch of lies, but it'll create a lot of confusion.
Some of us know, and more of people, when you look at the number of people that are brainwashed completely, I think that there's going to be a very big numbers of people are going to buy this thing. So thank you for doing the work that you're doing, trying to educate people to think about and look at this, because I really agree with you. I think that this is what's coming down the pipe. And how we are going to deal with it is probably going to determine our future forever. I mean, how we interface with ET when it's the big awakening has everything to do with the future of humanity. And right now, these guys have a lot of power, and most of all, they have the hypnotic control over huge numbers of people. I mean, when you can get people to take a bath or put 14 masks on your face before you go out. When you see people driving down the road with 3 masks on their face, with the car window rolled up by themselves, you realize that this is a form of insanity. And so whatever is driving this kind of insanity, which I think is all kinds of technology, and most of all television. I really believe it's coming through the television, not to mention what other scalar waves or whatever else is being blasted out. But a lot of people like you need to get this word out to prepare people to at least think about that. And my message to people is every day, scrutinize everything you see. It's not what you think it is. Be careful, don't buy into sensationalism. Who is this person? How did they end up on the internet? Like I said, some of these people just appear and they're instantly everywhere. They have no background, no nothing. And people are just like, oh, did you hear what he said? Blah, blah, blah. In the awake community, in the alternative communities, I'm seeing a lot of not so awake people. What do you think about that?
Yeah, totally. It's very scary, the power that the media has, the mainstream media has. I mean, I didn't realize it. I mean, until this, I thought people were much more critical and much more aware. But, I see it here in Hawaii. I mean, so many people driving around in their cars with masks on. It's unbelievable. And now they're starting to call unvaccinated people plague rats. I mean, in the United Arab Emirates, they're talking about the people that are unvaxxed as plague rats, and that we're being demonized. And France has just passed policies now in France. I mean, one of the bastions of Western freedom and liberty has passed laws now that you cannot go into movie cinemas and restaurants without your VAS passport.
And if you do, you could be put in jail for 6 months. Did you know that little number?
Oh, that I didn't know.
Yeah, 6 months imprisonment.
Wow. I mean, so
I'm in Portugal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was in Italy, and Portugal is a little bit more relaxed than some other places, but I'm on an island in the Azores, and it's relaxed until I want to get off the island. And then the whole mechanism with the strange blood-brain barrier probes, and I won't do it.
Yeah. And so when you look at all of that, then absolutely, the deep state and the media and big tech, I mean, they can definitely pull off something like this or get close to making it succeed. But maybe their goal, I don't think their goal is to succeed at all, to be frank. I mean, I think their goal is to create maximum confusion and to create sufficient chaos that will sabotage what emerges with the collapse of the deep state. I think that's their real goal now. And that's, and the Nazis did the same thing at the end of the Second World War. I mean, it was very clear to the generals, the Nazi generals, that Germany had lost. But the Nazis, they didn't care. They wanted to drag it out to the very end because they knew that they had a post-war future, and they wanted to move all of their resources off planet. They wanted to move all their resources to Antarctica and South America so they could continue the fight from there. So Deep State's doing the same thing. They're moving all of their resources off Earth, away from Antarctica. They're moving it all to Mars and to Ceres. And that's where they're going to continue to fight from there. And they have their Earth allies, countries like China, Turkey, maybe Russia, that will be their partners in the decades ahead.
So are you saying that their plan is to be attacking Earth from Mars, or can they just destroy each other on Mars?
Well, I think what's happening is that the deep state has lost the war.
Yeah.
So now they're just moving to places where they will be able to continue to fight in the future war. So the future war is going to be one where the Artemis Accords are set up, Starfleet.
Right.
It's going to be like Starfleet. They're setting up so that they can fight Starfleet in the 2030s. That's their agenda now.
Right out of Star Trek.
Yeah, so they're setting up, like the Wrath of Khan, the transhumanists. That's what they're doing. The Germans, the Dark Fleet, they are genetically enhanced super soldiers. Like the Wrath of Khan, that is all based on that. The transhumanists, the Borg, that is out of Star Trek. That's what they're setting up now. They're setting up a future where on Mars, Ceres, and elsewhere, wherever they have their bases, they have their genetically enhanced super soldiers. They have their transhumanist forces ready to fight against this US-led multinational coalition, which today goes by the name of the Artemis Accords, but in the future will probably be called Starfleet, something like that. And that's where they're going.
Is that why Trump chose to create the logo that resembles the... I find that very charming, to be honest. When I saw it, I thought, that's such a Trump thing to do. What do you say to that? Is that why we've got that reproduction of the Starfleet?
Yeah, I think exactly. It's like that Space Force logo is very similar to the Starfleet logo because that was set up. That was set up from the beginning. Air Force Space Command used a very similar logo when it was set up in 1982. And that was because, I mean, it had a rationale for doing it, but I think part of the thinking behind that is that, this is something that in the future will become very important. And so, yeah, it was modeled on, well, put it this way, the Starfleet logo that came up in the 60s, whenever they came up with that logo, that was predicated on what would happen in the 2030s, in my view, that they based it on that. So it's like you have a temporal echo, if you like. So then they adopt that, and then Space Command comes up in 1982, and it's like, oh, well, we need a logo for the Air Force Space Command. And so they choose something that is very similar to Starfleet. And, you know, and there's a kind of, you know, it's a chicken and the egg thing. Which came first? I don't know.
Exactly.
It's like,
And,
it's a chicken
and
and egg.
were they traveling back and forth, or these designers of the plan is another question. Was this a time travel situation, or were they projecting? It sounds like there was some time travel going on here.
Totally. A lot of the secret space program stuff is using time travel. In fact, that's something that I discussed that with Corey Good in an interview, and he pointed out that what they've been doing in the secret space programs, in the Solar Warden program, which is run by the Navy, he said what they've been doing is they've been going back in time to the 1930s and 40s, and they pick out talented individuals and they bring them into the secret space program to serve in the 2030s and the 2040s.
Wow.
And so then at the end of that 20 and back, they take them back in time to the 1930s and the 1940s. And these people become visionaries for the future. So it's like, you know, is this where Robert Heinlein and Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, did they get their ideas because they were part of these? Because I think this is where Gene Roddenberry got his ideas definitely from. Either Roddenberry served or he was briefed by someone who did serve. And I think the person who did serve was Leslie Stevens, the creator of The Outer Limits. Because if you look at The Outer Limits, episode after episode comes up with these futuristic ideas. Where did he get all these ideas? I think he served on the 20 and back program in the 2030s and 40s.
How fascinating. What is your, I've got one more question for you because I know we're getting on here. I hear a lot about people who claim that they served on Mars. They simply walked through an office door and walked into an elevator and they were on Mars. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that kind of technology has been around for some time. The 1970s seemed to be when they tested all of this, and they used children.
Yeah.
We know there are separate programs, Project Pegasus and also the Montauk Project. They started off with children, putting them through these portals where they could go to different places. And once they perfected the technologies, then they started to use it on adults. Children, for some reason, they found that when they tested adults, the adults would just lose it. That children's minds were more flexible, more open, more fluid, so that could test children on it, and the children had a higher chance of success. So they did that, used it on children, perfected the technology, so that later on they began to use adults, and they were moving adults through these portals to Mars. And so this is where you have a lot of these secret space program whistleblowers coming forward saying that, yeah, I used the portal, it took me to Mars and I came back and so forth. And they talk all about that. So yeah, that technology does exist. And, you know, there's a lot of secret space program whistleblowers out there. Now, the thing is, not all of them are real. Not all of them are genuine. Some of them are delusional. Yes. Some of them are fabricating it. Just as you know, in the channeling community, some are genuine, some are delusional. And it's like you gotta be discerning. You gotta really be discerning. Look at, you know, what is the difference between good channeling, bad channeling? What is the difference between a genuine insider and someone that's deluded? You got to look at all of this.
And then there's the other group of people that are they're not deluded, they're deliberately sending out misinformation.
Right, yeah. Right? Those are the ones that are part of the programs.
Channel or informant. You've got the deluded, you know, I mean, it's a great place to be if you're mentally insane, is this alternate reality that are our communities, because you can say, I had, you know, a conversation with the Mars beings underground in the on the planet and through a portal. And, you know, a lot of people are going to say, wow, we've got this great new source. And how can you question, really, how can you vet it?
Well, that's it. I mean, you got a lot of people that are prone to delusion, that suffer some emotional, psychological problem, and they watch episodes of Cosmic Disclosure, or they read a book, say whatever book on a secret space program, and they say, oh yeah, I served on a secret space program. I was the supreme commander on the Allied fleet. You know, we fought against the Dracos off in, and they just, you know, just a complete delusion. They just dream it up. And so this is going on as well. So as a researcher, you know, my job is to like try and work out, you know, who's telling the truth, who is emotionally stable and has no need to monetize this or self-aggrandize themselves with, because those are the clues. It's like, you know, people who don't have a professional background or a solid emotional core, or, you know, they have a need. There are clues for identifying who's deluded, who's part of a covert program, and who's the real deal. So yeah, you got to do the work, and it's not easy. I don't name names because I just work with the people that I feel are genuine, and if someone's not genuine, I stop working with them.
Yeah, I think that,
and that's the way I do it.
That really give you a sense that they're grounded in their spirituality and in their perception, and that aren't trying to own any information. They're just trying to share what their access is. And to do that, it is a certain quality of pure information that can't be, it's very difficult to miss. But there are a lot of false prophets out there, and the numbers are increasing, because when we look at what you're talking about, which is the event, in the meantime, before this event happens, or hopefully doesn't happen, there's still, people are deluded to think that our communities are not infiltrated with actors. And when you talk about creating confusion, man, you know, they've got to break down who we are, the awake. They've got to break us down. We're too powerful. We can disrupt them. So we get all manner of disinformation, misinformation. And another thing that I'm finding happening is a lot of people who were solid are starting to crack. You know who I'm talking? I mean, I'm not talking. I don't name names either, but people that were go-to people for information are starting to say some pretty weird shit. Right? And you know, when that ego starts to blow, the auric field cracks. I know what I'm talking about. It just gets a fissure in it, and that's how they get in. I've seen it over and over again. So beware, people. I mean, I'm glad Michael's talking about it, and you know I'm always talking about it. Beware, turn up your discernment machinery, and pay big attention to what's going on around you, because we aren't in Kansas anymore. Michael,
Totally.
it's been delightful talking to you. It's almost 2 hours, and I don't want to keep you any longer, because I could talk to you indefinitely. I mean, just open up the channel, and I mean the channel between us, not the channel, and share so much stuff. You're just an amazing person. Thank you for being on the planet, for choosing to be here to help. Do you want to
thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia, for having me, and for your work in putting out your information, and you know, your questions were excellent, and your knowledge of these issues are really good, and I'm glad you're here and helping us all navigate through all of this stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, as long as I can stay up and running, I'm gonna keep being the voice of conscientious objector and spiritually grounded voice of what I understand to be truth and humility, and seeking people like you out to keep on the pulse of where we are. I'd love you to leave with how you think this is going to play out. What happens when this happens?
I think it's going to play out that we are going to have an incredible awakening. There's going to be so much truth that is going to be revealed. There's going to be a lot of advanced technologies that are going to come out. The ones that are going to be really exciting are going to be the health technologies, because they're going to release the stuff that kind of like helps eliminate a lot of diseases, cure all of these various diseases, and of course, age restoration or age being able to live up to 150 to 200 years. I think that's going to happen. That's going to be really exciting. The med beds, all of that stuff is going to come out. So, you know, there's going to be a lot of confusion, a lot of chaos, because the deep state people, you know, they're going to slink off into the background, but they'll still be there hiding in the shadows. That's what they do. They'll still be creating problems, but there'll be a lot of really good stuff released. Not all of it. I think they're going to keep the really best stuff for the military, for the intelligence community, for the major corporations, but still they're going to release a lot of good stuff, and especially the health, because if you're going to have people traveling through space, going through all of these highly radioactive areas in space, you're going to need to have really advanced health technologies. So they're going to have the med beds and the stuff to cure advanced radiation, all of these things. So for those of us that stay on the Earth, it's going to be incredible. For those out in space, you're in for a wild ride.
Yeah. One last question. Do you think that we'll be seeing a cure or somehow some way to subvert the spike? Because, you know, everybody is concerned about what about these people that have taken the VAS? Is there a way to deprogram that AI?
You know, I've heard different people try and answer that question. Some saying that it can't be counted, that, you know, that the ETs can't reverse it, that a free will choice has been made. At best, they can mitigate it. So yeah, I think there's probably ways to mitigate it, because ultimately people have made a free will choice to believe in a lie and allow that to be injected into them, and so yeah, you're going to pay a karmic price for that, and that's unfortunate. But it's not as though there weren't people out there warning them, and we know what happened to those warning others about this. So yeah, there will be a karmic price, but I think it can be mitigated by those you know, that seek help, and the ETs or these new technologies that come out will mitigate it as much as possible.
I have to say that I do clairvoyant scans on people and reading, and I'm starting to run into people who I can't see the crown chakra when I'm working on them. And
Wow.
and I say to them, did you get the no, let me backtrack. I can't see the crown, and I'll say to them, I'm having trouble seeing your crown chakra. And they say, and I mean, it's about 4 people now. They say the exact same thing. I can't meditate. I don't feel God around me anymore. I don't know what's wrong. And I say, did you take the VAS? And they say yes, every time. And
Wow.
so it's really alarming to me, because that means some really dark stuff going down. So people, if you're on the fence here, think clearly, get more info. There's plenty of info out there. Don't be beguiled by the mass programming. Think about the fact that a lot of us, I'm one of them, I don't believe that it can be reversed. I believe that it can be mitigated, but you're allowing AI to go in and change your DNA. And that is, sorry, no-go zone. You're not getting into P. Cori unless I'm dead, and you can do what you want with my body, if you can find it, because it'll probably be in the deep ocean with the dolphins.
I'm sorry to hear that. That's you know, very disturbing that people that are already in that progressive life of meditating and understanding the crown, the chakra system, that they've fallen for the propaganda, and they do this, and now all of a sudden all the years of work in meditating and connecting with God and being aware of the universe and cleaning your chakras, all of that work is compromised because you're gaslighted by the media and the big tech, and it's like, yeah, it's very sad.
Well, I mean, if it's a satanic agenda, what they're after is your God connection, right?
Yeah.
So it's very, very serious. But I mean, now I'm about 5 people in here where I can't see the crown chakra. I mean,
Wow.
it's weird, very, very weird. Because when I read, I start with the crown chakra and it's not there. And
Wow.
I've never had this in all my work, my years of work, not seeing the crown. And then each time they say, yes, I've had the vase. I'm like,
Wow.
well, okay. What do you say?
Yeah.
Right?
I don't know.
Let's hope. I mean, we've got Judy Mikovits and a few other people saying we are working on ways to mitigate this, but the best way to mitigate it is to not roll up your sleeve.
Yeah. Totally agree with you.
Michael, it is just a delight. Thank you so much. I just really, really respect you, and your visions are exciting. And I'd like to remind everybody that on the 1st, which is not too long away, you are doing a webinar on this question of
Yes, on the coming false flag alien psyop. So that'll be August 1st. That'll be a webinar. And they can just go to my website, exopolitics.org, and information on that webinar will be there. And the Space Force book, information on that, again, just go to exopolitics.org.
Okay, well, you guys join me. I will definitely be on that webinar listening to this fascinating information and getting the latest from Dr. Michael Salla. Thank you. I hope you'll be back soon. I love you.
Thank you. Aloha.
Aloha. All right, everybody, you've been listening to Beyond the Matrix, the program that asks you to think outside the box. And boy, you know, I got goosebumps. We've been doing that today. So thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. This is Patricia Cori signing out.